Hello friends, for today's video I am doing a follow-up to the video 2 Writers from Readers Please Stop Romance Edition. There was also a similar style video, but rather than be Please Stop, it was More Please, and if you didn't see those videos, I'll have them linked, but the setup for those is I asked over on my community tab and then over on Patreon, what are some things, it does not have to be within romance, contemporary romance, or even fantasy romance, just anything to do with romances in books. What are things that you're really tired of seeing, and then what are things that you would like more of? And in those videos, I wanted to ensure that I actually got through a lot of your responses, and I took the time to give a decent amount of a response to a lot of what you were saying, as I know a lot of these things are elements to stories that we can go on and on and on about, and I just really wanted to get to have that connection with all of you and see your gripes and also the things that you would like more of in your books. But that did mean I didn't have the opportunity to provide my personal recommendations for what sort of remedies the things that we don't like. And so that's what today's video is going to be for. And I'm zeroing in on a few different things that got brought up a lot. So one of the things was the alpha male love interest. And it's so funny because this does not need to be a thing we expand on, but alpha male in romance terms in books is so different than what it is in real life. That's neither here nor there. But regardless, a lot of you are very tired of seeing that kind of love interest, so I wanted to give some recommendations for stories that branch out of that. We also have stories where everybody is extremely young. A lot of you were saying you'd like to see more than just really young people experiencing love for the first time. You kind of want to see that person who's been through a little bit of life. Maybe they had a love and that person passed away, or something tragic happened, or they just had breakups because that's part of life. And so we have a list of books for that. And then the third thing that we're going to zero in on would be enemies to lovers. Some of you are just tired of seeing enemies to lovers, and that's completely fair. But one of the big criticisms is that you actually genuinely want to see enemies to lovers. You want to see those characters that start out hating each other. They were truly enemies in the sense that they're on opposing sides of a war or a conflict, and they have to reach across the divide. They have to learn about each other, understand each other's motivations. Maybe they gradually start to respect each other, and then eventually that turns into love, as opposed to just the first time they met, one of them slightly annoyed the other person, or just a wrong first impression, which is pretty much all it takes these days to get categorized as enemies to lovers. We're going to give about 6 to 7 books for each of these categories. There are additional categories that I would love to do a follow-up to this and do a part 2 and address some of the other things that irritate you and myself as well. So if you're interested in seeing a part 2, just let me know and I'd be happy to do that. And then I know I've been yammering for so long, but the last thing I want to mention is that all of these books I'm not going to go extremely in-depth for, because I want to actually get through a lot of these and provide you with a lot of recommendations, but I have talked about a fair amount of these pretty extensively over the years. So if you're interested in seeing more about these, I will have, if I can find individual reviews or wrap-ups or those sorts of things, I'll have those linked if you'd like to hear more. Anyway, finally getting into it, the alpha male character. So the first one that comes to mind would be This Savage Song and its sequel, Our Dark Duet. It's a duology, and it's V.E. Schwab, so in typical V.E. Schwab fashion, you have a very wicked feel to it, and the setup is really unique. The premise is unlike a lot of things I've come across. It's essentially our world, kind of more of an urban fantasy feel, and the idea is that people's horrible acts have actually turned into monsters, and there's different levels of monsters depending on how horrific the violent act or bad act was. And interestingly, and kind of defying expectations, the monster, one of the monsters that exists in the story, is actually an extreme cinnamon roll. They're incredibly sweet, they're artistic, they love music, and they're just a character that is very soft and kind and calm, and I feel like it's one of the most precious characters that you're just like, oh, I don't want anything bad to happen to them. Next up, we have one of my favorites. Actually, the next two, a lot of these are my favorites. I think I have a soft spot for the soft, very sweet character. The cinnamon roll characters. I feel like this whole category could just be a list of cinnamon roll characters. So a lot of them are favorites. We have Strange the Dreamer, Mistborn, Encyclopedia of Fairies. So Mistborn, you have the love interest. And actually, I do want to say, if you don't like hearing at all about if a character may or may not be a love interest, then you might want to skip over me talking about Mistborn, because you just might want to skip over me talking about Mistborn. But I do want to describe this character, so I'll have a timestamp if you want to skip ahead. But regardless, the character in this is somebody who is very academic, very studious, and I don't mean academic as in they're constantly going to school, but rather they like to have these philosophical debates. They like to really ask the tough questions, and they want to do that so that they can be very principled, and then they can apply those principles to potentially governing and trying to make the world a better place. It's just really nice to see a character that is more likely to be in the library than they are to be on the battlefield. I love a good warrior character as well, but it's nice to have some variety. Strange the Dreamer, Laszlo Strange is just the best. He is so quizzical. He wants to learn more about the world. He wants to learn more about other people. And even when other people mistreat him, he tends to come to the table with an open heart and a willingness to hear people, to listen, to understand people. That does not mean he doesn't feel a full range of emotions. He just often pursues the emotion that is kind of more to do with being a good person to other people and not being rash. And it's just so nice to see characters that are not just immediately jumping down people's throats because somebody just happened to glance at their love interest. After that, with Encyclopedia of Fairies, Wendell Bamblebee in this story, there's been some comparisons between this character and Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. They seem like they exist slightly in a different world. Like, their reality feels as though it's different than everybody else's reality. They navigate life in a way where it's like, do things not affect you like they affect the rest of us? They just never seem to be very sullen. They never seem to take things too seriously, except for occasionally when their love interest is threatened, and then all of a sudden a very different side comes out. But for the most part, they're just very silly, and they're very particular about certain things, and they're just such a entertaining, delightful character. The Bone Shard Daughter also has a wonderful character that I have said so many times stumbles into being heroic. That's how I always describe him, as he is just trying to search for his missing wife, but he just kind of can't resist helping people along the way. And in doing this over and over and over again, he kind of ends up becoming a hero to a lot of people, and he starts helping people in a way that he never expected he would, but he just can't help but do the right thing. And it's really it creates for a very engaging plot line, because this is a character who they face a lot of hardship and they have to make some really difficult decisions, but it's so against their nature and it just absolutely breaks your heart. Then we have Godkiller, another one that I absolutely adore. And in this one, the main character is very cutthroat, hard, harsh, and then the other character is so soft and sweet, and they're a fighter. It's not that they can't protect people or that they are scared to protect, like, they really are going to protect those they care about. They're going to protect anybody, really, which is a great trait in a lot of characters. I think we like characters that go out of their way to help people that can't really help themselves. But on top of that, they just want to have their bakery, and they seem to really love their parents, and they're just so nice. Like, it's like these two conflicting parts of them, and I just love characters like this. And then the last one would be in Warrior of the Wilde. I should say the last one for this category. And the setup for this one is we follow a young girl who has to go through these trials, and she, through some unforeseen circumstances and interference from some other people, she ends up failing her trial when she shouldn't have. And the only way that she can ever come back to her village is if she fulfills tasks that are essentially impossible. So she's been exiled, and she is determined to try and get her way back, claw her way back. And the love interest in this is somebody who has also been exiled from their village, and they're just so chill and so sweet, and they are very supportive, and they're very open with their feelings, and they're so cute. And then there's an additional character who's in the story who is also really cute. Warrior of the Wilde, despite its cover, you would think that this would be more of a story about fighting, and I like stories about fighting, but this one, it's really about survival and found family, and the characters are all, their relationship with each other is precious. So that's it for some anti-alpha male love interests in some stories, getting now to the everyone is young. So these are characters where everybody isn't young. You actually have some characters that have lived through some stuff. A book that I mentioned in the other videos, and I just want to reiterate again, is perfect for this category would be Paladin's Grace. This is a story that follows a man who his god has died. There are multiple gods. They have certain powers as a result of serving their gods. His god died. It resulted in basically like this immense amount of power being unleashed, and it led some of his brethren, his brothers and sisters in arms, to not be able to control that, and it led to some pretty devastating things. Now there's only so many of them left, and so our main character is just trying to grapple with that as well as be there for the other individuals that were his brothers and sisters in arms. And he has lived a fair amount of life, and he ends up crossing paths with a woman who is essentially the fantasy equivalent of divorce. They don't really, I don't think, call it divorce in the story, but she has a history with an ex that seemed like was not very good to her and maybe even might still cause her problems. And these two characters have their own lives. They have their own individuals that rely on them, and they're trying to find a way to be there for each other, even though they have so much on their shoulders and they have so many other people that they care about. And I feel like that is something we rarely see. After that, we have Second Era Mistborn, and this one just in general has a lot of more adult characters. And actually, even though a lot of people criticize Sanderson's works for not really being really, the romances are not the things that tend to stick out. The couple in this series is one of a lot of people's favorite couples of the entire Cosmere. And they really have a different set of circumstances than is what you typically find in their society. And the woman even embraces that. She's like, I know I'm a little bit older. Here are all of my qualifications as to why it is a good idea to marry me, because they're trying to look for a match among houses, and she navigates it in a very practical way. She's very pragmatic, and it catches him off guard. He's not really sure he's ready for marriage. He had somebody he cared about before, and something happened to that person. He doesn't know if he'll ever really love somebody again, and just the way that these two find love with one another is fantastic. After that, we have the Witcher series, and so this one is, I'm sure you know, about a monster hunter named Geralt. And Geralt isn't just an adult, he's also lived a long time, because Witchers live a long time, as do sorceresses in their world. So you're seeing him and the sorceress that he is in love with. They have a very on-again, off-again relationship, in part because their lives really pull them apart. Sometimes it's of their own making, sometimes it's outside circumstances that pull them apart, but these two characters are certainly a little bit more experienced in a lot of things with life. After that, we have Engines of Empire. So this one has an epic fantasy setting, and it's kind of a turn-of-the-century feel, which I always really like, and I think that's a really cool thing to explore. You're specifically following the Hawksburg Guild. You have the mother and her 3 adult children, and then there is another perspective that I always refrain from stating, because I think it's almost a twist when you actually see who it is. But regardless, you have some adult relationships in this story, and their past and the secrecy of certain things. It makes it a very compelling relationship, but on top of that, it really adds additional layers to everything, and it actually kind of shifts your perspective on certain things. And as soon as you find out about certain things, you're like, oh wait, hold on, that's gonna affect a lot here, which I really enjoy about that. And then we have the Queens of Renthia series. This one is about this forest setting where people are trying to live in harmony with the forest. However, inevitably, by living within the forest, they do cause harm to it, and there are these creatures that are referred to as spirits in the story, and the spirits have an instinct to protect the forest, and thus they try to defeat humans, wipe humans out to keep the forest thriving. And the forest setting is phenomenal in the story, and actually the relationship I'm referring to is not actually in the first book, it's later in the series, but you have a character who is a mother and she cares very much for her children, and her husband is not great with that. He's not the worst guy, he's just kind of an idiot. And so she is trying to do what she has to care for them, and there's somebody else who comes along who not only protects her, but protects her children, and just the way that all of that is navigated, I think is done fantastically, and it's so different from what you typically see with romantic relationships in fantasy. And then now getting to the enemies to lovers, actual enemies to lovers, and the first one is very popular duology, and that would be Six of Crows. This is a true enemies to lovers that you have within this. You have a character who was basically imprisoned by another character, captured, and was thought of as evil, and then through basically forced proximity, these two understand each other a little bit more. They're starting to realize that their impressions of each other are maybe not accurate, or maybe certain things are accurate, but it's lies that have been taught to them over and over and over again that led them to think the way they do. And then once they actually see reality for what it is, it causes them to change, and there's character growth, and they push each other and they challenge each other, and then they start to have feelings for one another. And that's, I feel like, what everybody wants out of their enemies to lovers. We also have the Bridge Kingdom. This one is not necessarily enemies to lovers to that degree, but it does fit within this very well, as you follow a woman who has to fulfill a marriage alliance, and she has always believed that the man that she's going to be marrying, who leads this one kingdom, she believes that he is responsible for the hardships that are placed on her homeland. And so she, when she's fulfilling this marriage alliance, the plan is that she is going to gain information on him and on his kingdom, and then serve as a spy to her father and relay very important information back to him. And then the man that she's marrying is fully anticipating that she is going to likely try to betray them, and so he really doesn't want anything to do with her. He's marrying her just to fulfill that alliance. But then you start to see the way that she starts to care about his people, and then he's starting to realize that she maybe isn't what he expected, but she still has that voice in the back of her head telling her, we need to take him down. And so you actually do navigate enemies to lovers. It's just enemies to lovers and not marriage of convenience necessarily. I guess it's marriage of convenience, so it's kind of a combination of different tropes. After that, we have Folk of the Air. This one's a little controversial because of the fact that it would seem our main character, who is a human who is living among Fae, is very mistreated by the Fae. There's a reason it's called The Wicked King in the second one. Cruel Prince is the first one's title. There's a reason that those adjectives are applied here, and it's because they're very cruel to her. They're very unkind. They mistreat her over and over and over again. And then you're constantly wondering where they're telling the truth and when they're telling lies, because they can't tell a lie, but they can say a truth that makes you think something different, or they can say a truth that is true of a different time. Maybe it was true of something 5 years ago, but it might not be actually true right now, but that doesn't technically mean they're lying, and so you're constantly trying to navigate that. And so whenever our main character is thinking that maybe there's something going on between her and another person, you're constantly like, is there something going on? I can't tell. And I think that constant, is this true? Is this not true? Makes for almost an edge of your seat feeling. It's not an action oriented edge of your seat feeling, but edge of your seat nonetheless. Also, the descriptions in Folk of the Air are quite fantastic. Then we have The Shadows Between Us, and this one follows a woman who is trying to marry a very powerful individual purely so that if she does win his heart and marries him, she can kill him so she doesn't have to deal with a husband. And then she can take his power for herself. That's our main character. And when you're introduced to her, you're like, did she already kill somebody? I mean, she doesn't seem like a very good person. And it is kind of shocking that this author is the same one that wrote Warrior of the Wilde, which was one of the books I mentioned under the anti-alpha male category. So very opposite ends here with our characters. But yeah, the person that she's trying to get to marry her, obviously it's her enemy, as her intentions are to just kill the guy. That's it for some. If you hate this, maybe try these instead. Like I mentioned before, I do have other categories if you're interested in seeing a similar style of video. And then let me know for whenever I do the 2 writers from readers or 2 publishers from readers, whenever we do those videos, if you would like me to do these follow-up styles of videos to go alongside them so that you have the recommendations to go hand in hand. Let me know if that's something you're interested in to have consistently happen. But anyway, feel free to leave your own recommendations in the comments so that this video is as helpful as possible to anybody who stumbles across it. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you later. Bye.